Welcome everyone to the RPG Goblin, where we make learning TTRPGs fun and easy for you. And we are going to be talking about a really awesome game called Twilight 2000, which is basically about surviving a war that never happened. You are in a alternate timeline than ours, where a nuclear war broke out in the year 2000, and you are playing as people who are surviving the aftermath of this war. It's a game fantastic for telling these survival stories about the human experience, and it's absolutely amazing. For my guest today, I brought on Adam from the Two Past Midnight podcast, which is a Twilight 2000 actual play podcast. Really fantastic, by the way. And we talk about the game and the stories that it can tell. If that all sounds great and you're ready to dive into Twilight 2000 and the human stories it can tell, then we should get into it. Welcome everyone to the RPG Goblin. I am your host Willow, and I am the resident goblin and the one who asks all the questions because TTRPGs are amazing and I want to make it fun and easy for you to learn them. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about Twilight 2000, which is totally the first time that we are recording this episode. And this game is fantastic. It is basically a survival TTRPG, and we'll talk even more about it in a bit. But it is a fascinating game, and in today's episode, we have brought on Adam from the Two Past Midnight podcast to talk about Twilight 2000. Adam, if you would like to introduce yourself, please go ahead.
Hey, I'm Adam. I'm the referee on our show Two Past Midnight, and we've been running it for a little over a year now, and I think 53 is coming out as of this recording next week. So sorry if I'm dating when we recorded this, but yeah, so we've been running it for a while, and I like the game. So
yeah, it's absolutely great. I've listened to the Two Past Midnight podcast. I haven't gotten super far in, but from what I've listened to, it's really good. I loved the whole character creation, first episode. I just always love those session zeros where, you're going through the character creation and going through the world and it's just building as you're talking. I love that. And then actually getting into the story, absolutely amazing. But where can everyone find you and your podcast so that, they can listen to it themselves and hear how cool it is?
On our website, we have links to the podcast on different platforms. It's dorkdayafternoon.com. Also on Twitter at dorkdaypodcast. I had to double check in my head if that was right, and that is. And then on Facebook, Dorkday Afternoon. Yeah. So I mean, if you search that or Two Past Midnight on any of the streaming services for podcasts, we should pop up.
Yeah.
Or Stephen
Absolutely.
King will. One of the two.
One of the two, and you'll have to use your own judgment to figure out which one's which. It'll be a surprise, start listening and
never know what you're gonna get.
Exactly. Like I said, this is definitely the first time that we are recording. So I want to go over just a little bit before we actually start about your experience in TTRPGs so far. What games have you played in the past and how long you've been playing for?
Oh, man. I started playing RPGs in the beginning, in the early 80s. I think it had to have been the early 80s. We were playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time, and then at some point moved on to some other games just because I realized there were other worlds other than just that. And it was like, oh my gosh, there's this one called Top Secret SI where you play, spies and it's all espionage. And then
that sounds fun.
Yeah, right. And then there was Twilight 2000, the first edition and second edition come out around that same time. And then I was playing Shadowrun and then another game called Star Frontiers around that same time. And then I started just buying role-playing games always, whenever I went to the mall, because that's what people did back then was go to malls. And I'd go to the bookstore and buy a Shadowrun book or Robotech or, all these different role-playing games I had. And
I love that.
I know. Yeah, it was great. And I don't know, I think at some point in my young adult age, I kind of drifted away from it for a little while. And then maybe about almost a decade ago, this guy I knew from work was starting up a Pathfinder campaign. And he and I talked about, playing role-playing games and stuff like that. And he invited me in to play Pathfinder. I brought my brother along with me, and we played this, couple years campaign of first edition Pathfinder. And then that kind of sucked me back in. And so ever since then, this is what I've been doing now. And it's addictive. I have a problem. And yeah.
I mean, is it really a problem
No,
though? You get to
no,
play
it's
really
not.
fun games with friends. Like I don't see where the issue is. No, but that is fantastic. It's so cool to have, so much
Mm,
experience within these games, playing them for so long, even if you had that break in
hmm.
between. But, you still played them like what edition was what edition of D&D were you playing? Was it like the advanced or like the
Yeah, I mean,
first
it was
one?
like the first one, and then AD&D, and then
Hmm.
yeah, and then second edition, and I think that's about as far as I got was second edition at the time.
Hmm.
And then around that same era, then when I came back into it, it was Pathfinder, which was basically the like the updated version of 3.5 as it was called. And
Hmm.
yeah, so in a way I didn't really miss any editions. I was just kind of out except for
Hmm.
fourth. I've never played fourth or fifth, I guess, but yeah. never actually played
Oh, you've
never
never played
actually
fifth
played
actually?
5e. Yeah. Just
Interesting. That's
yeah.
fun. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I mean, like, the fantasy games rule them
Hmm.
all.
Hmm.
Apparently, you come in with them and you get brought back
Hmm.
in with them, and I think that's great. And having that experience is awesome, especially with playing earlier editions of Twilight
Hmm.
2000, which is absolutely fascinating. And so I want to get into what is Twilight 2000.
Well, back in the first edition of it and the second edition, it was a in the future idea, because
Mhm.
it takes place in the year 2000. It's supposed to be kind of takes place after a war between the Soviet Union and the U.S., right?
Mhm.
And there's been like a small nuclear exchange between the two, and the main the normal campaign up for it is that you play like either U.S. soldiers or Polish civilians or something along those lines, and you're kind
Mhm.
of in Poland, and everything has the crap is at the fan, and people there's not a lot of food, nukes have gone off, there's radiation, and it's chain. There's no more chain of command. No one can
Mhm.
talk to like their capitals, and it's just you're on your own. And that's even like a line from the book is good luck, you're on your own. And it's
Ugh.
yeah, and it's such a great like, yep, here you go, that's it.
Yeah, that's the scene.
And then it just kind of it breaks down at that point, and it stops being those normal alliances, and it's just survival, and it's your little group
Mhm.
fighting against or not fighting and trying not to fight and just not get killed against whatever else, because just because you were from the same country doesn't mean you're on the same side anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
It's all, fend for yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Specifically, I just think of, like stuff like The Walking Dead
Right.
or those zombie type shows where it's like even though technically you all should be on the same side, there is like an opposing force, quote
Hmm.
unquote.
Hmm.
I not really in Twilight 2000 as much, but there are other things that are happening. Yet it's feuding against people,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's where those stories come from. And I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
what kind of? Oh,
sorry, I was
sorry.
just going to real quickly say the other thing is because I started off with this. Now that we're in like the fourth edition of Twilight 2000, the one that just came out by Free League, instead of it being in the future, this made up war that you know hasn't happened yet. It's in the past in a like alternate reality.
Mhm.
Like a different timeline where it's like in this timeline it did happen. The Soviet Union didn't fall, and they go into like detail in the referee's manual on like where the history changed and what why this change has happened. But anyway, that was it. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was the last thing I wanted to say.
No, it's great. I think I find it really cool that they even took the time and effort to like go over,
Hmm.
the timeline of it, what changed and how it came to be this way.
Hmm.
Especially like people who like lore in
Hmm.
games. I bet that it's a very fun I shouldn't say fun read because, kind of nuclear
Yeah, yeah,
war and stuff like that,
right.
but it's interesting how they set the scene like that. Or Twilight, the main objective of the game is to survive, right?
Hmm. That's pretty much the main objective of the game. I mean, and if you're playing the standard, U.S. soldiers stuck in Poland, like it's literally you're stuck in Poland. You don't have a way
Mhm.
home, and you're on the other side of the globe. So kind of the default is either carve out a little place to, call home here or try to figure out how to
Mhm.
get back home, you know. And so there you can go pretty much anywhere at that point. It's just the world's open, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Wherever you want to go.
yeah. It's good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, this is a good game for those survival stories. But are there any other, like, elements that this game supports story-wise?
I mean, you can tweak it like in any
Mhm.
way. I mean, because like I said, the setting is military, but there's a lot of stuff in the player's manual and like character creation where you don't have to be military. You could be a civilian. So you could
Mhm.
totally play this. And there was a TV show called Jericho. Like you could play it in that kind of, idea where it's like you're this small town and, you're
Mhm.
dealing with marauders, or you could theoretically throw in zombies if you really wanted to. Like, it wouldn't be that hard. It wouldn't be that difficult to put them in. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And you mentioned as well, like this is also good. Mentioned as well in not another episode. That it's good to even explore those personal stories as well of like these people
Hmm.
that are surviving this catastrophic event.
Hmm. Well, and yeah, because that's part of the thing with character creation is when you make your characters, like one of the last things you do is you come up with what's called a moral code and a big dream. So that's just
Mhm.
like, and there's mechanical benefits to those things. Like if you go, or mechanical negatives for those things, depending on the situation. Like if you're going against your moral code, you might take negatives on a roll. Whereas if you're doing something
Mhm.
for your moral code or trying to achieve your big dream, you might get bonuses or get more XP,
Mhm.
and then you also pick a buddy, which also has mechanical benefits. Like if you're doing something to protect your buddy, get a bonus for it. But then again, on the flip
I
side,
love that.
if you watch your buddy get injured severely or die, you have to immediately roll to see if like you take stress, which then you could like go pretty much catatonic from, theoretically. So
Oh no.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's what I love about a lot of these TTRPGs is when they bring in these mechanics that actually also support like role
Hmm.
play and character growth and those types of opportunities. I just find that absolutely fascinating. But, already kind of going in with the character stuff, I would love to cover character creation and how that works and how you like the steps of creating a character for Twilight 2000.
Right. So yeah, so the fourth edition one uses a life path method. I mean, it also
Mhm.
has an archetype one if you want to just like make up a character real quick. It probably would
Mhm.
take you like 5 minutes. Where you just it's like roll for where you can allocate your attributes, and then kind of go from there. And you can make a character really fast using that.
Mhm.
But the life path one, you actually go through phases of their life and like have to roll for how many years each term, as it's called, how much it takes up. And it's like at some
Mhm.
point you could enlist, or and like I said, in the standard setting, if you don't enlist, but when you'll probably get drafted at the end. Like
Oh no.
if you go through your terms and like when war starts, like you get drafted. But you don't know when you're done with character creation until it
Mhm.
happens, right? Like you don't go, okay, I'm done. This is it. You keep rolling until war starts, which is one of the like interesting parts of it because you just roll
Yes.
like a D8, I think. Yeah, it's a D8 each term, and if you roll under the number of terms you've gone, then war starts. So as you
Mhm.
go along, it gets more likely until after your eighth term, and you're like, yeah, war starts now. So if you make it
And
that
that's just for the individual characters too, as well.
right,
It's not just like you're not like as the GM rolling after each term for all of the players. It's individually.
right, exactly. So you could have one character that war starts for them in their first term, and they're only however many years older than 18 at this point, and then you could
Mhm.
have someone who goes 7 terms, and that way
Yeah.
there's kind of a randomness on how much experience each character has and how many specialties each character has, because you get all of those from different terms, because in each term you can choose a career path each term, and you can
Mhm.
kind of be like, I go to college, and then you go and become a professional and get a job doing something, like it you can kind of pick and choose and bounce around, and it's a I don't know, it's really it's a cool way to create the character because you can do it as just like
It
the
is.
dice rolls, and you get these specialties, and you know you get extra skills and whatever. Like you can play it that way and just look at it as mechanically, or you can each time those rolls happen consider like, okay, why? Like what is it about this person's
Yeah.
story that brought them to this point? What brought them to this point? What made this happen? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was one of my favorite parts with listening to that like session 0 that you guys
Hmm.
did and building your characters was, why am I going this route? Or like kind of figuring out those
Hmm.
aspects
Hmm.
of the characters as you're going, which I can't even, I can't remember names right now, but whoever was the stoner.
That was my brother, Jeremiah. That's his
Oh,
character. Yeah, his character Jacob. Yeah.
yeah, Jacob. I just remember like, it was like, oh, I go to a farm. It's like, well, weed, obviously. It was like, okay, yeah,
Obviously, he's
absolutely.
growing weed in
It
the
was
hills
really
somewhere
fun.
in West Virginia. Well,
As one does.
well, that's also because I added in an extra mechanic on like where they're from. I made a
Mhm,
random table that I based off the U.S. Census at the time, and so
mhm.
I made a percentage, a D100 table based off the what percentage you were likely to be from what state, basically.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and then I had everybody roll for that for what state they were from, and that because you don't get a choice on what state you're born in, it just
Mhm.
happens. no, one, no one gets that
You just
choice.
spawned there.
Yeah, you just spawn. And that's just the way it works. But then the other part of it was my brother has a tendency when he makes characters to be as random as he can. So even when
Mhm.
it's a choice that he gets, he's like, "No, I'm rolling for it. It's one of these three
Yeah, I
things,"
remember
and
that.
he rolls a d6, and I'm like, "Dude, you get to choose this." He's like, "I don't care." I'm like, "Okay, all right, go for it."
I'm going with the flow.
Yeah,
Going with the flow, guy. It's
yeah.
it's great. No, I thought that was fantastic, and just I think the character creation with the life path, specifically the life path character creation,
Hmm.
is so fun
Hmm.
to do. I mean, I only listened to it and I was having a great time. I can't imagine actually doing it.
Oh yeah.
And so going through the different steps, because you roll for the term and blah blah blah. Is that Are there additional steps that happen during the terms that you are working on, such as like, getting abilities or attributes or stuff like that, or does that happen after the term is done?
Well, at each term, like depending on what it is, what career it is, whether it's military, and even then it's broken down like what within the military, or if it's like a professional job or a doctor, whatever.
Mhm,
You know, you have to roll a skill check that's associated with that term, like whatever your career is, and if you fail it, you don't get anything from it, right? It's
oh
just
no.
you don't gain any skill or you don't gain the specialty from it. But if you
Mhm,
succeed, then that's when you get the specialties for it. And then you also have to roll for aging each time, which
mhm.
happens. So you have to roll for that to see if, like, for some reason, and that'll knock down attributes basically. And
Mhm,
once those get lowered, they're permanently lowered. Like you can't raise them up later. You know what I mean? Like you don't get
mhm.
to add experience points in and bring your strength score up to 24 or whatever. Like it's there. That's where it is. As you age, it doesn't go up.
Yeah, you're an old man now.
Yeah, you're
Like,
an old man. You
it's
blew
just how
your
it is.
yeah, you blew your knee out when you were 32 or whatever. Just happens.
Oh no, 32 being old.
I'm not saying 32 is old because I'm older than that. I meant in the sense that like it happens when you're 32. If you're now 44, it's gonna mess you up.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Stays with you.
Absolutely. And so, very quick, I'm curious, what are the specialties? Like, what are the specialties and like the abilities that you get from those when you succeed on those roles?
So what the specialties will usually do is they'll give you a bonus to certain skills, and
Mhm.
sometimes, like generally speaking, for the most part, most of them are like you get a specialty as a sniper, you get a +1 when using a sniper rifle, or something like brawler where you get a +1 when you're actually I don't remember what brawler does, but I think there's a melee one that's separate. Anyway, but so there's different special, and they'll give you a +1 in certain situations using certain kind of tools, or it'll be I'm kind of scrolling through the different careers right now to look at them. Builder, which will give you a +1 for if you're building a settlement. You know what I mean? Like if you're building
Mhm.
like your base, because you can make a base
That's
in
really
it like
cool.
later on, and so you get bonuses for that. Or there's like quartermaster where you get bonuses for setting up like root cellar and storehouse for keeping track of your supplies and all those things.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So,
really cool. I like that it's also not just like combat oriented
right.
stuff. It's, actual useful
Yeah.
things that can come up during the game.
Yeah, and I mean, like farmers kind of like that. It's just like, for growing food. And then there's
Mhm.
one of my favorite there's two that I love and that we've used them a couple times. One of them is historian, right? And literally all that is, so it's under recon, right? Which recon's kind of your
Mhm.
perception, your stealth, and like your awareness in general, right?
Mhm.
And what it is when you arrive at a new location, you get to roll a recon roll. And if you succeed, the referee can tell you something significant that has happened here in the past, if anything.
Uh-huh.
If like it could be like, yeah, 50 years ago, this battle was fought here. You know what I mean? Like 100 years ago,
Yeah,
or
that's really
this
cool.
castle from, you know what I mean? Like just because you're in Poland, so it's almost just, storyline wise at that point. And
Mhm.
or the other one we have that the party's used a lot is there's a specialty called cook, right? And so every time
Mhm.
like you have a party member that either scrounges food or scavenges for food or hunts for food or fishes for food, you get an extra ration out of it. So that's kind of like, they know how to
Which
make
is great for a
sausage.
survival game.
Yeah, they know how to get every piece of, edible whatever out of whatever you got. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I love, again, how it's just also, I love looking at it of like, the mechanical benefit, but then like the flavor that comes with it. Like, why do you know these things?
Right.
And I love that those are tied in together.
Mhm.
It just makes for a really cool experience.
Yeah, and like all of those specialties are linked to whatever career path it was you had during that term.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so, is there a way as you, just because I'm curious, is there a way as you are going through the terms to lose a specialty?
No, no. Once you have the specialty, it's there, and you can
Mhm.
increase skill ranks as you go along.
Mhm.
Like that also comes from that success that you get. You get to increase the skill rank in something. But so the only thing you can lose is attribute. Your attributes could go down, but you can go up in your skill. So you can kind of
Mhm.
compensate for, maybe if they're a little bit weaker now, they know how to use their strength better. That kind of that you can kind of compensate for it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And so I think that, just because you're mentioning it quite a bit, these skills and attributes, what are those? I'm assuming attributes are like the stats.
Right. Yeah. The attributes are there's four basic attributes. There's strength, there's agility, there's intelligence, and there's empathy. And then
Mhm.
underneath each one of those, there's four skills. Am I just pulling a number out of my butt? Underneath each one of them, there's three skills. And so, like under strength, there's close combat, heavy weapons, and stamina. And then under agility, there's driving, mobility, and range combat. Under intelligence, it's recon, survival, and tech. And then under empathy,
Mhm.
it's command, medical aid, and persuasion. And what they mean by command is less because there's kind of a military leaning in the game. The command is more
Mhm.
about being able to boost the morale of the people around you. You know what I mean? Like that's
Mhm.
that's kind of more what it's supposed to be. And so yeah,
Yeah, being almost that like rock,
right.
like leader type situation where it's like, I'm taking control in a way of like, you don't have to worry about it
Mhm.
and
Yeah, it's
now others feel better. I like that.
yeah, it's not telling them what to do and they do it. It's being able to lead by example. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's kind of cool to see that work mechanically in a game like this. You
Mhm.
know, Twilight 2000 is based off, or it is the Year Zero engine, which is
Mhm.
the Free League's kind of. It's their really amazing system that they have for multiple games
Mhm.
that they adapt slightly for different settings that make huge differences and really fit the different tones of each game.
Mhm.
And in this version of it, in this incarnation, each rank that you have in an agility or I'm sorry, each rank that you have in an ability or in a skill adjust the die size that you're rolling.
Yes, I
Yeah,
remember that, which
yeah,
I thought was really, really cool.
right, right. But yeah, so it'll go from like an A down to F, right? And then
Mhm.
an F is no die, which you can't ever have in an ability score because you have to have some strength. You know what I mean? Like as a living entity.
Yeah, no, you just like
Yeah,
crumble to the
right.
ground.
You have to have
I don't
some
exist.
intelligence. So like the lowest you can go with those is a D, right?
Mhm.
And then D is a D6, C is a 8, B is a D10, and A would be a D12. And anything that's a 6 or higher is a success. And then anything that's a
Mhm.
10 or higher is two successes. So you can get
Hell yeah.
multiple successes off of a roll, depending on what your setup is and that skill and attribute, and you roll 1 die for the attribute and 1 die for the skill, and any modifiers, like situational modifiers, depending on the situation, like if it's combat, if you can see them or not, or if they're behind, or if they're prone, or like if it's a social situation, if there's more of them than you take negatives to your persuasion roll,
Oh
'cause
no.
there's more of
Yeah.
them than you. So automatically.
Actually, I like that though.
Yeah, yeah.
Adding in again those mechanics to fit situations.
Mhm.
God, I love TTRPGs.
Yeah. But yeah, so any bonus,
But I think that works really
yeah,
well.
any bonus either increases the die size or decreases it, and it does it like
Mhm.
equally. So, like for example, if you have an A and a D in something, it would increase the D to a C, and then a C to a B, and then a B to an A at that point. But better
Mhm.
example would be if it was a B and a D, it would increase both. It would increase the D all the way up until it's a B, and then one would increase to A, and then the other would increase to A. Yeah,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
that's really
Yeah, it's a
cool.
really cool mechanic.
I love it, and that's where I don't know. I find it very interesting. I haven't come across a lot of games other than this one and Kids on Brooms that kind of goes by dice size, different dice for the different skills. And obviously you can have the same ones for different skills as well, just with how the game works. But I find that really interesting that, you can have a bunch of different ones and you can be really good at some things, really bad at other things. And then like you break down into skills as well. And it also includes that, which is just wild. And it's almost a little bit like a dice pool system, but not quite because you only get 2 dice.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean the original Year Zero engine was a D6 dice pool system, and this was the first time. I think in Forbidden Lands there was like, if you had like an artifact or like a magical weapon or something like that, like you could get like an equipment die that went up to like D12, Or then the only other time I've seen them use this specific kind of mechanic is in the Blade Runner game. It works with the same one, just minus ammo dice, which is a whole other beast in this game. But I don't know. I like the die step system, but I also like the dice pool one. So they're both a really interesting way to achieve those roles, I guess. But
yeah, Free League's just great. Praises all around. Right? But yeah, no, that's really awesome. And so when you get your as you're going through your terms, you're getting your specialties, you're increasing and decreasing your dice as you go on. Is there anything else that happens within the term process?
Let's see.
Before you hit, war starts.
I think that so you could decrease abilities, increase skills. I think that pretty much covers what actually happens during the terms until war starts.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Once, I mean, you roll randomly for how many years passes in each term. So that way it's like, and I think that's a D6, if I remember. It's been a while since we did that. It's been a year since we did session 0, and and every time since then, anyone has had to roll up a new character, I didn't walk them through it. I just let them do it on their own because I trust them.
Yeah, you can do it. You were a baby once, and
now you're an adult.
Now you can do it yourself.
And you can
exactly.
Watch yourself and make sure you don't cheat. I don't need to do that.
Amazing. Yeah, so, as you go through the terms and then you hit when war starts for that character. Let's say everyone gets to war starting. That's when that part of the character creation starts.
Right.
What is the first thing that happens?
Well, when the war starts, it kind of just like quickly summarizes at that point. It's just like, okay, now here's your, war term. And it basically, it's like you get very specific, things. You get an increase in range combat if you didn't have anything in it, because they're like they would have now taught you how to shoot. You know what I mean? Like, because the assumption is you got drafted. So now they're like, here's a rifle, learn to shoot it. So then, yeah, you get that, and then you have to pick like what kind of part of the military you were in, because you don't necessarily have to be combat arms. You could be like combat support or combat service support or special operations or an officer. And so there's like different options. And even then you could theoretically choose to just have still been a civilian if you want to, but then you're going to have to like justify why wherever you're starting your campaign off, which could lead to some really interesting characters also. It's like,
Oh, for sure.
This person was a ambassador, and just kind of got stuck there, like there's a lot of different ways to go with that, but yeah, so once,
Or even someone who's local too, which would be interesting.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there is a lot of different directions. That's again, that's
right,
where that's collaborative. You figure out
hmm
what direction you want to go.
hmm
That's really cool.
yes,
I like it.
yeah, so you could be a pole, or you could be, you know, whatever, someone who just happens to be here, for some reason or another, yeah, and uh, sorry, I got distracted by thinking about the last 50 some episodes. Anyway, it's
all 50 played in your
oh my
mind
God.
at the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
time.
A whole bunch of things just played out. But so then what you end up doing is then you roll. You don't roll for aging at that point because it's just like, okay, now you're as old as you are, whatever at that point.
Yeah.
And you roll for how much food you have, like how many days worth of food you have, how many days worth of water you have, how much
It already
ammunition
makes
you
you like
have.
have that feeling of like, oh shit, this is gonna matter.
Right, right. And it's a D6. It's not a lot. It's like
Yeah. No.
you have on average 3.5 days worth of food and 3.5 days worth of water on
Yeah,
average.
and max 6?
Yeah,
Like
max,
that's still
even
not a
week.
lot.
Yeah. And then same with like reloads for whatever weapon you happen to have, which is, still not a lot. Like 3.5 would only be, I guess that's like, what, 105 rounds if it was a standard M16, because they're like 30 round magazines. So it sounds like a lot, unless that you can't go buy anymore. You know what I mean? And you have to just scrounge whatever you get. So
there are no stores.
There's no stores. There's nowhere to just pick it up other than from somebody else, Then you roll for how many spare rounds you have, which is kind of like random rounds that don't fit in your weapon, basically, that are used more as like currency, because that's kind of what the currency is in the game is rounds. So you can, just use those to buy stuff if you get to a place like that.
Which I like that aspect a lot. There's
Right.
still that, trading between people and, bullets, obviously, like you said, when you run out, you can't just get them from the store. You can't just pick them up. This is something of value. I like it.
Right. Right. And then you roll. I'm trying to figure out if I missed something. So you roll for that. You roll for I think the last thing that you then roll for is how much radiation you've been exposed to, like up during the war while it happened. Because yet again, the setting assumes nukes have gone off and everyone has been exposed at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And what that ends up affecting is if you come across an irradiated area or accidentally eat something that's been irradiated, which can happen.
Oh no.
or may or may not have happened in our game.
I feel like something has happened.
And that affects how well you can fend it off. And so then you automatically get an extra rad if you're exposed to it, or more, depending on how severe radiation it is. And then you have to roll against that virulent, like as if it's a disease, basically, to see if you get like radiation sickness from it. And then it, the more you've been exposed to in the past, the more likely it is to not be good, basically.
Yeah.
Basically. I'm laughing about this, but it's, it's a game. That's why I'm laughing. If it was real life, I would not be laughing.
It's a game where, you're playing with your brother and your friends and all that. And, you can laugh about it because, they're the ones.
Right.
they're
the
characters. Yeah, exactly. I'm not a part of this. Well, now I have to know very quick. What happened? What did they eat?
An animal. But I don't want to tell you which one until you get there.
No. Oh, I'll have to wait now. This is gonna kill me. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
No, but that's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, and the thing is too, like in this game, like these things are real. You know what I mean? Like in our reality, in our real world, there's radiation. There's things like, there's diseases, and
there's war.
There's war, and but they're also in a role playing game. There's those analogies in other games too, where it's like curses. You know what I mean? Like there's this area that's a curse or negative energy, and conceptually they're the same. You know what I mean? And I think this just takes those things that normally get passed off as just gamey mechanics and like makes it relatable, and it I don't know, it
more
shifts
real.
right, and it makes it more real, and it at least in our group, it lends us to a slightly more dramatic way of playing the game than just like shoot 'em up, bang, dungeon crawl,
Yeah, because it's a tricky subject,
Right,
war
right.
and something that can very much happen.
Hmm.
And so I would hope that anyone who, looks to play this game, as cool as it is,
Hmm.
check in with your group often. Make sure to have a session zero go over what people are comfortable with and your expectations for the game too, so
Hmm.
that, you don't make people uncomfortable
Hmm.
and like, on purpose.
Hmm.
Like you're all sitting around the table to have a fun game. Even if I think realism is fine in games as long as everyone at the table agrees to it and agrees to what's going to be touched upon. And so as long as that's good and you have safety tools as well, which are also valuable, and session zero and all of that, and constant communication with your players,
Hmm.
this is absolutely a game you can play and have a great time with and explore really cool stories. Just make sure to be considerate towards your other players, because this can be a very touchy subject. So just be careful with that. It's tricky and all of that, but as long as you all understand it's fantasy.
Hmm.
Well, not fantasy, I guess. Made up
Hmm.
in this scenario. Just be considerate and have fun playing a game because you're not trying to make other people uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. Unless you are, and then you're an evil GM. Like I get
Yeah,
accused of being
exactly.
sometimes.
And there's a difference though between like, a dynamic where, as like you said, you've said before,
Mhm.
that you tend to be like a bit not cruel or evil, but like it can seem that way. But like you're playing with people that you've played games with quite a bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's already table dynamics in there, like you guys know each other.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
even then you still want to do like check-ins and session zeros and stuff like that just to make sure you're all on the same page. But as long as the expectation were these things and
Mhm.
people at the table are okay with it, then there's nothing wrong with like, throwing hard stuff and
Right.
throwing really like morally tricky
Right.
situations
Exactly.
towards players because those create interesting stories
Mhm.
versus trying to be actually evil as a
Right.
person.
Right. Yeah. There's a huge well, and I mean, well, that's one of the things is that like my brother and I had talked about this like before, like when we were discussing doing this game as a podcast. We kind
Mhm,
of we had many long conversations about this because so there's five of us on the show and three of us are veterans, right?
mhm.
So we can all relate in a way, you know what I mean, to like
Yeah.
some very specific settings in this. And, not all of us were in during wartime, but like
Mhm.
some of us were. And so we've had lots of conversations about how to kind of even dance around that, not dance around it, but how to
Approach it.
approach it. Yeah. Without, and being considerate. And yeah, we do lots of check-ins and lots of like after sessions, we'll talk about things and we also try to keep it as lighthearted as possible, even when it gets really
Mhm.
dramatic, because it's a game still, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And but there are times where I want to definitely have the gravity of the situation be there, but I also
Mhm.
okay, in like the first episode, there's a thing that happens at the end, right, where they come across these burned up cars, right? And
Yes.
I wanted to imply something without like explicitly saying it, and so instead of like
Mhm.
being like dead, well, blah, 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 whatever. Like, I was like, this is in the back window of a car. You know what I mean? And that was
Mhm.
enough to just like get the point across of that situation without being explicit on what, the goriness of a scenario, because I don't,
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to do it.
yeah, yeah. It's like, I don't need to roll around in the blood. It's there and I'm going to point to it real quick, but I'm
Mhm.
not going to like, we don't have to linger on it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is your
I try to be,
often
yeah.
safety tool and all that
Yeah.
conversation.
I try to be,
Always
yeah,
important.
I try to be subtle in the game as much as I can be, and then sometimes if the point's not getting across with my subtlety, I have to be more specific sometimes. But I try to be
Yeah.
subtle when I know it's a specifically touchy subject, you know. that
Yeah,
way.
and I think that works well, and as long as everyone at the table,
Mhm.
and at least with like people who are listening, if it is too much for them, that is the one great thing about like media, because people love horror
Mhm. Mhm.
and stuff like that that makes them uncomfortable or scared or feel certain things. The great thing about that usually is the fact that you can turn it off.
Right.
And so as long as like the group is all good and like everyone's having a good time, there might be people who listen that are uncomfortable with it and don't
Mhm.
like it, but the good thing is that you don't have to listen.
Right. Right.
You can go away. You also have a Pathfinder podcast that I think is I think you said it was on hiatus before, but there's
Yes.
still episodes up, so you can still listen to it.
Yeah.
So you can still hear Adam be awesome. So I mean, just
Yeah.
listen to Pathfinder.
Yeah, and I'm a player in that one. I'm not even GMing that one. I get to
Ooh,
be a player
exciting!
in that one. Yeah, I love that game.
Absolutely.
But
So
yeah, I love that game. But yeah, back to this one. But yeah, so but yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is there are a lot of touchy subjects within it, and I kind of told everybody too from the beginning that I wasn't planning on running it as like an action movie. You know what I mean? Like if this was a movie, I'm not doing an action movie. It's a horror story.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's the theme. It's more like The Walking Dead. It's more like there was on Netflix recently, like in the last year, there was the All's Quiet on the Western Front, right? They had that, and I was like
Mhm.
this, you know what I mean? Where it's not just action and whatnot. It's like it's about people, and that's kind of what I think
Mhm.
where it's more interesting is when it's about people in these situations and what they do with these situations. It's not, shoot 'em up, bang. So, yep.
Yeah, I personally love that. I love the direction of focusing, and I think you, again, you mentioned that in the not first recording that we did, where
The
you
one that was definitely not
you said
deleted.
yeah, no, that you also when you wanted to run the game, you said you wanted to focus on those narrative stories, and when we were talking about it, you're like, you know, there's all of these narrative things, and like even though combat is a huge thing,
Mhm.
I don't want to focus on that, even though like you like touch on it and stuff, but like that's not the important thing. And I think you mentioned that you haven't had a ton of combats even in your own game.
Early on, there definitely were not a lot. I mean, still to
Mhm.
this day, if you count the number of episodes that there is combat in compared to the ones that there is not combat in, it is strongly leans towards not combat. It is a
Mhm.
lot more role play, a lot more survival, a lot more them trying to figure out, avoiding combats. You know what I mean? Like trying to
Mhm.
figure out how to avoid this. Like you come across a roadblock and you're like, I don't want to die today. Let's try to go around it,
Don't want to die today.
It's like this isn't worth fighting over, it's just a road. Let's just go around, because those are the
Yeah, and I love
options.
those. Yeah, those are choices that you
Yeah.
can make. You're not stuck in a situation where you have to fight,
Yeah. Yeah.
which can tend to happen in some games where
Hmm.
combat's a huge aspect of it. They want you to usually fight. All of
Right.
your abilities revolve around fighting. And
Hmm.
so when you start this game, what are like, do they give you resources or advice on like running the game itself in a more narrative way versus combat?
So in the game they have a what are called encounter cards, which I
Mhm.
think they have them also for they have them for Forbidden Lands, and I think they have them for Mutineer Zero also, where it's like so basically the travel mechanics are like a hex grid, and it's like 10 kilometers, and you travel like a certain number per shift in a day, and
Mhm.
and so each shift that or it's kind of up to the GM on how often a referee. It's up to the referee on how often you draw a new encounter card. So you could be like,
Mhm.
I'm only going to draw one this time, or you could be like, you're in a relatively busy area. It's going to be a new encounter card each hex. And
Mhm.
so that kind of creates the world around them, because it'll be something like you come across some hunters, there's a crater
Mhm.
that's left over from a nuclear strike, roll against
Oh no.
radiation, like
Yeah.
but or it could be like, there's a roadblock, by from some marauders or something. And they're really vague and not real specific on motivations and who this guy is and where
Mhm.
he came from. And like none of that's written into it. It's just like this is here. And you kind of, as the referee, the person running the game, get to like fill in those holes, those gaps on like, okay, this is here. What does that mean? You know,
Yeah, that's
and
fantastic.
then there's like in the referee manual, there's tables for rumors, there's tables for like radio chatter, because you could have a radio and like listen to it every once in a while, and it's just like you hear random
Oh,
stuff
that's
on the
cool.
radio, which could be, develop into something in your campaign. And like the way I've been running it is I've built the whole campaign just around whatever random encounter card I draw. And it's like, okay, if this is here, what does that mean? And if this is here and that's there, what does that mean? And like, what does it mean that these
Yeah.
things are both in this area, this general vicinity of each
And you
other?
can build upon it.
Right. And it just kind of like evolves the story that way. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really cool way for me, because then I don't have to plan, okay, they're level 1, right? They're gonna do all these things, go through every room of all of these dungeons if they find all the secret doors, and then fight this big bad guy at the end. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to plan that.
And will they die?
Or they die and make a new character. Like this just like evolves organically as the story progresses, and then everything they've done before you can relate to now, and like in the game. And the other thing is too is that the thing I talked about before, the big dream or the moral code or the buddy, those can change at the end of each session. You can pick a new moral code, you can pick a new big dream,
nice.
You can pick a new buddy. And so, yeah, because if your buddy dies, you need a new buddy. Like, yeah, that happens. That could happen sometimes.
Sometimes.
Every once in a while, maybe.
Yeah, this is by the way, anyone who's, if you haven't gotten it by this point, this is a deadly game. Like,
yeah, combat deadly. Yeah.
This is going to kill people. Yeah. There's reasons why there's like, stress and radiation and, guns and stuff like that. People do die in this game. So if you get attached to your characters easily, this might not be the one for you.
Or it might teach you to be okay with death in an
That
RPG.
Is also fair. If you want to start experimenting, see what it's like if your character dies a horrible death of radiation. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh no.
Oh man. But I mean, but that's the thing too, is like what we've done whenever there has been a character death is I've tried to add some gravity to the moment, you know what I mean? And still let it be that character's moment,
Absolutely.
Like this is their death scene, and so it's been interesting when it has happened to like kind of riff with that player on like, how are we going to do this? You know what I mean? Like, how do you want to, do this? Or it's like, I was kind of thinking this, and then we kind of go from there. And so it's led to some really interesting death scenes occasionally when it's happened. Yeah.
I love giving that power to the player, because this is their last moment. This is, even as the actual player with that character, that's your last time with that character, and it's almost like being able to say your goodbye to and come to terms with the situation.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and it's a collaborative story too. And that's the other thing, and this gets to the mechanics of the game just real quick. So if you fail on a roll, you can do what's called pushing a roll, right? Which is where you re-roll anything that's not a success already or a 1, right? Because you might push a roll if it's like an opposed roll and you need more successes to beat the other person in a whatever it is. And if you roll a 1 on that pushed roll, then you take either a point of stress if it was like intelligence or empathy, or you take damage if it was strength or agility, or if you're using some equipment for that role, like if you're shooting or you're driving a vehicle, then that equipment loses reliability. So that'll actually damage the equipment instead of you. And well, shoot, there was a point to that. But yeah, so that ends up adding in a whole other level of like, okay, you can take this chance. Like you've rolled a 1 and some other number that's not a success. Do you want to push this? Like, are you willing to take that point of stress or that damage or damage your weapon or whatever in this moment to possibly, end the situation that's going on right now, in your favor.
Making those decisions. Actually, very quick though, because we didn't really go over like the stress and kind of those resources, I guess. What the stress do to the characters?
Okay, so the way that when you make your character, you I don't remember the exact like how it's figured out, but I know it's based off of the empathy and the intelligence. I'd have to go back to the book and figure out. Like I think it's like the average. Like you take the die size of each one of the two stress you would take, intelligence and empathy. Add those two die sizes together. So like if it's a 12 and a D12 and a D8, for example, it'd be 20, right? And then you divide by 4, and that's what your capacity is for it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's how it works. Yeah. I had to like quickly do the math in my head and go, yeah, that's that. And so you do that. So that's like your capacity. So if you ever reach your stress capacity, you become incapacitated by stress, which would be like rounds are going off around you or whatever, and you're curled up in a ball, unable to act, you know, in that situation. And the same with the way damage works. It's very similar where it's you become incapacitated by damage, which doesn't mean you're dead. It just means you're not able to act until someone comes over and in the case of damage would give you first aid, or in the case of stress, that's where that command roll comes in.
Yep.
They come over and use the command thing. I was like, get up, blah, 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 whatever. And then you get back some of your stress and you can keep going.
Really cool how that works. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when that happens, once you reach your stress capacity, even if it's somebody coming up and using command on you, you have to roll on a table for trauma. So then now you have this, and that's similar to the way the crits work, but you have to roll on this trauma table. So now you have this other thing, like your hands are shaking, you know, like your hands shake. And so then that would affect, like, I think you're driving and you're, you know, shooting or something like that.
Oh,
or
that's
it's like
so
different.
upsetting.
Yeah. So then it's like now you have these negatives to it, but those can be then treated later on with like therapy, which is like a first aid thing again. So, but then the way damage works is every weapon or explosion or whatever has like a critical threshold, right? So like if you do a certain amount of damage with that weapon, because each extra success is more damage, once you pass that critical threshold, you now roll on a crit table. And then depending on the location of the wound, because you also roll for where you hit unless you aimed for a specific location, like you roll a D10, and some of those like in chest and head are really like instant death, you know?
Yeah.
And
I actually saw, I don't know even where I saw it, but I saw a meme the other day where it was literally like rolling damage in this game, and it's like an example. Then rolling damage in Twilight 2000, and it shows the die where it's like where you hit, and it was like a headshot, and it's like no.
Yep, that's pretty much what it is. It's like, yeah, all right, that's it.
Death.
Yeah,
Instantly.
and I mean, and then it's done, you know, and you're like, oh,
yeah.
What do I do now? It's like your character's dead. I don't. That's it. You know. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So, and you know, if you don't get headshotted, you roll on the table. And so, what are some of the things that you could roll for there?
You mean as far as the crits?
Yeah, for the crits.
Oh man, so some of them have more long-term effects than others, because that's the thing too, is it all depends on how bad it is. Like some of them say, you know, permanent, for example. Like in one of the head ones is a gouged eye, right? And it's like you take a negative to range combat and recon from that point on, but it's permanent. Like that doesn't go away. You now only have one eye, you know. And for the most part, most of them have like a heal time, a certain number of days it would take before it heals. And yeah, it's, you know, or severed legs on here, which is, you know, permanent, or, you know, arms, same thing, permanent. Like, but most of them have like a heal time, like how many days it would take before it heals. And then other ones that's just it, you know, this is a new part of your character, you know. Paralyzed, I think's one, but that one's not permanent. It's cracked spine. Yeah. Hello?
Okay.
What happened?
Sorry about that. My power just went out.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like I'm a curse.
I'm gonna give it just a few minutes because I'm not gonna get back. We're not gonna start until I'm sure it's not gonna immediately go out again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, the way the odds and luck go, it'd be like me where my power goes out next, you know.
If that happened, I think that means it's destined that just like
the show ended because the world ended. Remember that nuclear holocaust the game's about? It happened.
It was real convenient timing,
Oh, man.
like
It's weird how it worked out that way. Oh, it's like I'm the referee. Oh, man.
Oh,
Oh,
goodness.
God. See, that's the thing though too about me is I have a really like weirdly dark sense of humor even in real life. Like when
Mhm.
stuff like this happens, it just makes me laugh to no end when it's just shit like
It's
this.
it's hard not to because it's
Like
like, the
yeah.
absurdity of it all. It's just like, yeah, of course.
Right, right. Yeah, of course this is how this goes. And then it gets worse again and you're like, "Okay." And then that last stress point breaks and you are incapacitated by stress because you're just
Yeah,
laughing too hard.
exactly. Yeah, let's bring it
Which
back.
weirdly is not on the list for some reason. Free League, let me critique you on that one thing. Hysterical laughter should be on this list.
Exactly.
I mean, I guess alcoholism's there. That's probably the closest one to me. Oh, man. But yeah.
Yeah, so Twilight
Oh,
2000, am I
oh,
right? Yeah, that's
yeah.
what we were talking about.
Yep, yep. Yeah, so yeah, the crit table's pretty terrible. And yeah, I mean, and it's just, it's a dark setting, but there's,
Mhm.
and some people have more of a stomach for darker settings, like you were talking about horror movies or, things like Game of Thrones. Like, and I was saying this too before about being subtle about certain kind of situations because there
Mhm.
are times watching horror movies that I'm like, I can't watch this. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there are certain kinds of horror movies that I can't watch because they're too, I don't know. They just hit buttons for me, and I'm like, I can't
Intense,
watch this.
gory, just ugh.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know, and I think that's okay, and it's different people
Mhm.
have different levels of comfort in different situations, and you were talking about it before about like some kind of safety, communication at least between the players and the referee and everyone kind of being on the same page, or at least everyone being adult enough to bring it up. You know what I mean? Be like, hey,
Mhm.
I am not comfortable with what's going on right now, and it's like, okay, that's cool. Then
Yeah.
we'll like back it off, and we can do
Mhm.
that or cut away. It's like we can cut away now, which is my favorite thing to do anyway, because it gets to a point sometimes where I'm like, I'm getting uncomfortable, and I'm the one
Yeah.
describing the world to them, and I'm like, I'm gonna cut away. you know?
Yeah, that's a powerful tool, and that's
Yeah.
something where I think, looking at movies and shows and stuff like that and the way they frame scenes,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
take inspiration from that, cut away, fade to black, like,
Right.
you can move it away at any time. You are all controlling the narrative.
Right.
If you don't want whatever is happening to happen, you are fully capable of stopping it.
Right.
Whether it be if you are in maybe a game with new people, you can remove yourself from that situation. You can
Exactly.
get up and leave. You can ask them to stop. If you're in even a personal game as well, you can do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Just communicate and make sure that you're being comfortable and all that. But I'd love to, even though, I think the narrative of this game and the narrative storytelling that you can do is absolutely amazing. And I love that that's like the focus that you're going for,
Mm-hmm,
and I love
mm-hmm.
that it supports it so well. I think it would be wrong to not discuss combat, at least
Oh yeah.
briefly,
Yeah, because the last
and how that works in the
yeah,
game.
because the last time that we didn't talk about this game, we definitely
Yeah. Mhm,
did not
mhm.
talk mostly about combat.
Totally not. Nope.
Yeah, so I mean, combat works the same as any of the other skill checks, except for it's going to be ranged combat if you're using small arms like a rifle down to like a pistol, or
Mhm.
if you're using like heavier machine guns or rocket launchers or grenade launchers or things like that, like the larger things, that'll be like heavy weapons, right? And
Mhm.
those use different ability scores, which I think is interesting because it's like heavy weapons requires your strength, whereas like
Mhm.
the range combat your agility, and I think that's a cool twist because it's like it's a larger weapon that you have to like muscle in a specific direction. Like it requires that strength. But even then, it's like written in the rules that it's like unless it's mounted on a vehicle, because now it's
Yeah.
agility because now you don't have to stand there and hold this thing, you know.
Yeah, because the thing is now aiming
Right,
instead
right.
of.
Or like if you get into artillery where it's like now you're using intelligence with it instead
Mhm.
of strength or agility because that can't that artillery cannon does not care how strong or agile you are. It's about how well you can do math, and like
Yeah, no,
do
that's actually really
calculus.
interesting.
Right, right. And I mean, and that's the thing. That's what my brother did when he was in the military. Was he was in artillery, and because he's really good at math, and that was
Mhm.
yeah. So I don't know. I think it's interesting that it works that way. But yeah, so the basics of it are, you roll that, and it's going to be modified by different situations like terrain, or if they were moving, because moving targets would be harder to hit, or
Mhm.
what kind of, if they're behind cover, that affects it. But that's more so like location. So like you can take what's called partial cover, and then when you get around to rolling for hit location, if it rolls anything other than head or arms, it's going to hit the cover first. So it's like you're over top of a
Mhm.
wall, and the only thing of you exposed is your arms and your head. You know, so if you
Mhm.
roll legs or chest, it hits the wall. And then that wall absorbs some of the damage. All right, I hit my mic. And then that wall would absorb
Okay.
some of the damage, and might shoot through the wall, but that depends on the wall and the bullet, I guess.
Yeah.
But
The
yeah,
situation.
yeah. And the cool thing about it is there's a lot of like little weird modifiers that I think normal people don't consider. Like for one,
Mhm.
you take a negative if the whole combat's based off of 10-meter hexes, right? So it's like a hex that's 10
Mhm.
meters. So way more than one person. It's not a 5-foot square, way more than one person can fit in that 10-meter hex. So like
Oh, yeah,
you could be in that
for sure.
10-meter hex with an opponent, which means you could either go into melee or try to shoot at each other, but you take negatives
Mhm.
for shooting at somebody that close. And that's one
Yeah.
of those things that I thought was really interesting when I read in the rules, because that's accurate. Like people, I think
Mhm.
and especially when it comes to role playing games, it's like you get a bonus because you got point blank shot. It's like that's not really how that kind of close
It's
quarters combat works. It's way harder to aim at something that close because they could, the way people move is different, you know. And
Mhm.
I don't know. There's a lot of little things like that. Like if you're in a room and you're in close combat, it's like that's like a -3 if you're using a rifle, or a -2 if you're using a pistol, and like the kind of weapon you have affects that. And I don't know, there's a lot of little
Mhm.
things like that that I thought did a really good job of reflecting how real combat works, I guess.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that is really cool because I think that also shows there was, again, like, care put into the
Right,
game.
right,
They are looking at it from that exact perspective,
right,
and they're not making it run like a D&D combat would. They're making it work in a very hyper specific way,
right.
which then just adds to the immersion of it all.
Right. And then you have these things called ammo dice, which would like affect how many rounds you're shooting at a time,
Mhm.
which basically add dice onto your pool. So instead of just rolling those two dice, you're also rolling however many D6s you decide to use, which would be like
Mhm.
if you're using a pistol, it's like you shoot once and that's just your one roll. Or you can use an ammo die, which means you're like shooting, like you're just squeezing that trigger until, whatever. And thing is like if you hit with an ammo die but miss with your skills, or if you shoot that wall in that situation I described earlier because you rolled legs instead of head or arms, like that person has to roll coolness under fire at that point.
Mhm.
And if they fail their coolness under fire roll, they might be suppressed, which means they can't take their next actions and they lose their actions. And so there's a lot of like movement and cover fire tactics that happen in
Yeah.
real life that are kind of built in the mechanics of the game, where it's like it's to your benefit to have one guy trying to suppress somebody while someone else is moving in, because that's the way
Yeah, for sure.
modern combat works. And I don't know, it's really interesting to see that like play out mechanically in a game, and with such like fluid forethought and very intuitive.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And, tactics, I think, is like, the right word. Like, there is a lot of tactics in that kind of
Mhm.
combat in general, like in the real world, but like bringing that and being able to bring that to the game is really
Mhm.
interesting. Do you find that players tend to work together more in combat or less?
I would say it depends on the players. And
Mhm.
yeah, it ultimately depends on,
Your
yeah,
players then.
it depends on the situation if they're thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes
Mhm.
they're just not thinking about it at that moment, and then that can be a
Mhm.
detriment. You know what I mean? If they're not considering that, and they're not being tactical, and trying to consider like, okay, I'm just going to cover fire while this other person does this thing. You know what I mean? Like if they're not thinking about
Mhm.
that, then it might not play out well in their to their situation, you know. But I mean,
Yeah, I
yeah.
like that, those choices do matter though. And I think that's the thing, like a good tactical combat, those choices do matter. It will, change the way that this combat will end.
Right.
Because if you mess up, then you might die.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and sometimes it's the tactics, and sometimes it's just the dice. You know, like sometimes just
That is also true.
the dice just aren't on your side on some days. You know, and that's just the way RPGs work. You know, so.
Mhm.
But yeah,
And
I
you
mean,
always have to have that element of surprise because, I mean, again, in real life, same thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't always work out, like your power going out in the middle of doing a recording.
right, exactly.
That didn't happen. Mhm.
Right. But I mean, yeah, and it's just I don't know if it forces them to think more tactically or behave in a certain way, but it definitely benefits. You know what I mean? Like they benefit if they do. You know, like you
Yeah.
you get advantage by doing that. But I mean, that's the same as a lot of other RPGs. Like all of them have a basic tactical philosophy baked in, whatever it is. You know, like there's like whatever system it is, there's a basic tactical philosophy within the game that like game tries to promote. You know, of like
and they want you to work with the other
right, exactly,
characters and players.
yeah, and that's why you have like in Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, you have the like standard party builds. You know what I mean? Like you have your DPS guy, you have your tank, you have your magic user, your wizard or whatever. You have your healer. Like you have people have a role to fill because those roles are important. You know, and then and if parties don't do that, it has its effect. Sometimes you can have a whole party of not poorly made characters,
Oops,
but
all bards.
yeah, or all fighters. You know what I mean? Like we're all fighters. It's like I mean, yeah, you could, okay, you can hack at stuff, but what happens if you go against a wizard? Like things could go bad real quick. But I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think that's the cool thing too. And the other part of it is there's not like in Twilight 2000, there's not like classes, so there aren't those like official roles. You can have a medic, for example, someone who's trained in first aid, so that when you have someone go down, that's their job is to go over and treat that person. But anybody could, you know what I mean? Like anybody else could go up and treat that person as long as you have any empathy, which you all have to have at least a D. So you might get a 6 on a D6. You might luck out.
I mean, it's a 1 in 6.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, I do want to touch on that very quick. The fact that the medical, the medical stuff is the empathy skill, which I remember you pointing out last time, and how interesting that is.
Yeah, because and that was the thing. Like when I first picked up the game, I was like, in my head, it was going to be intelligence, just because it just, that's in my head. It's Dr. House. You know what I mean? Like he knows all these things, but he's really bad with people. But even him, and I'm only bringing this up because I recently binge watched that show for some reason, and I don't know why. But like even then, like he was good at reading people. You know what I mean? And I think there's a part of that, like because I was a medic in the military, a Navy corpsman, and like that's a huge part of it is being able. You can't just take what people tell you always. You have to be able to interpret what people tell you. And like it's just being able to read people
and being able to understand.
Being able to understand and at least be like empathetic to okay, well they're walking that way because that leg hurts. You know what I mean? And like even if they're like no, I'm fine. It's like let me take a look at it. You know what I mean? Like there's those things. I don't know. And I think it's interesting that those things are tied together that way.
And it also like makes that person. I like the fact that like the empathy skill is, or the empathy like thing is there because it's like almost like humanity, because it can be easy to get lost in how like, oh, I'm not going to run this like an action movie, when some people might, because it's easy to get kind of lost in the war and the theatrics, and I mean even in real life as well, it's easy to get lost in that. And so having those like empathy and those types of like social skills is very, very interesting. Yeah.
Well, so the interesting thing about that, I don't think we covered this in the last recording that we didn't do. So there's the part about like later, like developing your character, which is when like you get experience points at the end of sessions, right? Like you can spend them on, increasing skills, or you can spend it on like learning a new specialty, because you actually have to have somebody teach you a new specialty. Like they have to have
I like that.
Right.
That's cool.
And then they have to make an empathy roll, or persuasion roll, I think is what it is, to teach it to you. You know what I mean? Like, so if those rolls fail, you get to keep
That's
your
really
XP, but you
cool.
don't get the, yeah, it's persuasion. I'm looking at it now. I was right. Woohoo.
Woo!
I was right. I didn't just pull it out of my butt.
No, but that's really cool. Even
yeah.
the way that like one of your other like teammates, one of the other people with you
Mm-hmm.
could teach you a skill, and there's just the social mechanics that
Yeah.
gosh, social mechanics are cool.
I know, right?
Again, I love these games.
So the really cool thing is, and this was where I thought was interesting, is so after each session, it's called gain coolness under fire, right?
Mhm.
So like that coolness under fire is based off of one, like if your character's been in the military, that goes up, right? So each character has their own coolness under fire stat for whatever reason, based off of that character's, like if they've been in the military for a long time, their coolness under fire is probably going to be pretty high. But you also have what's called a unit morale, which you roll with your character's coolness under fire. And that's going to be based off of the highest command within the group, like whatever character has the highest command. And it can go up and down depending on like what happens during a session. Like if you have a character die, your unit morale goes down. You know what I mean? Like the whole rest of the party's unit morale goes down because one of the other PCs died. And that's really cool, that like, okay, this his character died, you're all penalized, and I just think that's really neat. But then it can go up for like succeeding or, you whatever. So like those things kind of balance off of each other. But after each session in which you've made a coolness under fire roll and succeeded, it might increase, right? So you roll the base die for your coolness under fire. And if you roll a 1, it goes up by 1 step. So you can, as the game goes on, your individual character's coolness under fire can go up, right? But then the next paragraph is really cool because it says, however, becoming cooler under fire can make you emotionally numb. Each time your coolness under fire increases, roll a base die for empathy. If the result is a 6 or higher, your empathy rating is permanently reduced by 1 step. So it's like the more numb you become to those situations, the lower your empathy goes. And I was like, that's amazing. And it's just like 2 sentences,
really good.
and it does such a great job of like, I don't know, like summarizing that kind of the human experience, and I think that's really cool. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's so easy. It would be so easy to just not have those elements in this game.
Right.
That's the thing. And the fact that they do, I think, just makes it a million times better. Again, love you, Free League.
Yeah, right.
It just, again, it's telling those personal stories, and it's building up that platform to tell narrative stories. And that's where, I've played D&D for a long time, and even though it has some small social aspects in it, it doesn't support that kind of storytelling very well.
Right.
It is, we're in this dungeon and we're trying to defeat the bad guy and blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of story if that's what you want to play. But if you want to play something narrative, finding those games that support that is absolutely fantastic. So I love that this game has it.
And especially that there's like mechanical shifts to it, like to the character, like it affects the character, like it stops being that your bard tries to seduce the dragon, you know what I mean? And you just roll a D20 and there you go. You know what I mean? Like you stop having those situations and it becomes much more like fluid and situation specific and like how many of them are there compared to you or, and it's just across the board. And like you get experience points in this game for overcoming those obstacles in non-violent means. You know what I mean? Like it says, like it specifically is like the way you get, I think even your unit morale can go up by that.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's like, you get experience points if you've, overcome a, situation through violent or non-violent means. And it's like, that's perfect, because you might talk your way out of it and that's awesome. Or you went around it. There you go. Experience point.
Yeah. And make it just as valuable because that's again, where D&D has also its flaw. If you go by XP leveling, the only way you level up is you have to kill things. Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's why so many people have switched over to Milestone because it's like, why is that? That's that means that you're going to go out and try and hunt down things and you're going to fight all the time. And again,
Right.
if those are games that you like, there's no problem with that. But not everyone's a fan of combat and not
Right.
everyone's a
Right.
fan of that style of combat. So giving those other options where it's like you could talk
Mhm.
yourself out of a situation and get XP, fantastic. Though are there
Yeah.
so that's one way to get XP. Are there other ways as well?
Let's see. Let me look at it real quick. Earning XP. Yeah. Did you participate in the game? Like, were you here? 1 experience point. Did you show up for the session? You get an experience point.
I think
If you
so.
weren't here and you had to timey-wimey your character out of there, then no experience point for you. Did you follow
That's
did you
really
follow your
good.
moral code despite significant risk to yourself or your group?
Mhm.
So like in that situation, it's cool. It's like, like did your moral code go against the like immediate good of the group? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Experience point, Did you risk or sacrifice something significant to realize your big dream? Did you
Oof.
travel through at least one hex on the map that you had not visited before? So you can't just like back and forth, kill chickens and level up.
My XP grinding. How dare you?
I'm sure everyone's guilty of that. Did you overcome one or more dangerous events using violent or nonviolent means? Or did you risk your life for the PC who's your buddy?
Oh,
Like, and that's really cool
those
that
are so
those
good.
things are baked in as like mechanics in the game. And Free League's really good about that, about baking character into the mechanics,
Mhm.
and intertwining them in a way that's fluid and makes sense and is very narrative. Yeah.
Absolutely. I adore that. Those are in I've played a lot of well, I haven't played a lot of. I've played one Powered by the Apocalypse game, but I've read a bunch of the others.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
those are always my favorite things is looking at the creative ways, looking at the interesting and usually non-violent ways to
Hmm.
get XP. Like in Monster of the Week, one way that you get XP is did you save someone from certain death?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's those things versus, killing that monster or stuff like that. It's focusing on those again, character driven stories
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
each way that you just listed about gaining XP is something other than just participating, but
Right, right.
is getting XP through doing something through your character. You're
Hmm. Hmm.
doing you're actively doing something
Yeah.
and you're pushing that narrative forward and you're pushing your character forward and you're just making progress in the game and it supports it and it
Hmm.
rewards you because that's the best way to get anyone to do anything.
Hmm.
Reward them.
Well, and that's the other cool thing is, and I just thought of this too, like you can't just spend the XP on the skill and
Mhm.
increase it, right? Like let's say you have nothing in it at all, right? You have to succeed at that skill one time during that session to increase it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's fun.
Like so if you could have the experience points and not increase that skill because you didn't do it. So it promotes going out and like trying to do the thing so that you can increase that skill,
That's so fun though, because
right?
then someone
Yeah.
could have that idea in their mind, and especially if it's based on other people teaching it to you,
Hmm. Hmm.
you could go out and like that's something that happens during the session. That's a moment. That's a role play scene
Right,
where you're
exactly.
maybe talking with that person like, "Hey, I want to go I mean, I don't know the different skills, but like I want to go scavenging with you."
Hmm. Hmm.
And you could do that together and maybe you aren't good at that skill, but by
Right.
doing that with that person and having that scene, you build that bond, you have an awesome scene, and it also has mechanical value at the same time.
Right, right.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, I know, I know. Well, then I think you would get a bonus because the person's helping you, so you get a +1 because someone's aiding you at it. And,
Amazing.
like, one of the ones like, for example, you could have, like, the survival,
Mhm.
right? Like, 'cause survival becomes, up when you're, like, scavenging for food or, scrounging for food or, looking for stuff in general, or if you're setting up camp at night,
Mhm.
right? Like, because each night you have to someone makes a survival roll in the group to set up camp,
Mhm.
which could include a fire or not, depending on if, it's the weather, basically, because that's all those things matter. And if you fail, you're making camp roll. You made a camp,
Mhm.
but something happens. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you have to roll on that table. So it to increase your survival, you'd have to like do survival at some point and probably fail because it wasn't good to start with,
Yeah, and that's
or like,
really good. And the way of
yeah,
it also like pushing forward as well. It's not just you fail and no, that's
mhm,
it. Love
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, yeah, but it's like you have to succeed, which I think is interesting because because we talked about this at another time that we didn't get recorded with like Delta Green. It's kind of the reverse where like you learn through failure,
Yeah.
right? Like if you fail at a skill during that mission or that session or whatever, that investigation, then you get a chance to increase that skill because you learned
Hmm.
through failure. And I think both of them kind of latch onto that same philosophy of like you learn a thing by doing the thing. You
Yeah.
don't just spend points and get it, like
Yeah.
you have to like justify why. And I think that's cool, you know. Even though they're like opposing reasons for being able to get it, it's still like, like one is like you failed at it, so you probably learned something. The other is
Mhm.
like you succeeded because you failed at it a lot, so you probably learned something. Like, but they're both that same idea. Yeah.
And that's cool, like thinking of the past failures, but even, you kind of have to succeed on it to be good at it because you are
Mhm.
in such a life and death survival situation.
Right, right,
You can't always fail at it and learn because that's going to kill you eventually.
right.
But no, I find that absolutely fascinating. And I don't actually know how long we have been recording, but I have a few more things specifically that I would like to cover before
Mhm.
we wrap up. Specifically around the GM, aka the referee role
Mhm.
in the game. Do you have any advice for people who would like to run Twilight 2000 themselves?
Um, well, I mean, here's the biggest advice I could give anybody, which Free League does in the referees manual, is let the players lead.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like it's the best sessions we've had are the ones where I vaguely put something out there and let them run with it.
I
Like
love it.
whatever it is. And because I do so much minimal prep for
Nothing
each
wrong with
session.
that.
So sad. It's so sad. Because I like doing improv too,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I kind of want to make it up.
Yeah.
And most of my buffering time gets edited down. But but yeah, I mean, like it's let the players lead, and they kind of talked about that in the referees manual. It's like they have like these 8 different points of like the principles of the game, and
Mhm.
like number 3 is players lead the way. Which is like just let them go, let them explore, do the random encounters, and you know try to make the random encounters less random and tie in with their big dream in some
Yeah.
way or their moral codes in some way. And that's one of the things I would say is that like try to tie the story into the characters and like let that kind of develop. Like I don't know how far, what episode did you get to?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Don't worry about spoiling anything.
Okay. All right. So one of the characters decided that his big dream was to find his son,
Mhm.
right? Because his son was over here, it, like got drafted and sent off to war,
Mhm.
and so he like isn't actually currently active duty. He was in the military, but he'd gotten out, and then somewhere along the way came over here to get his son,
Mhm.
and so that's his backstory. And so I kind of built this. I built that into the campaign. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, you're looking for your son. Like he was with this unit. You come across this information about this unit. And so
Mhm.
now they've been on this, like, trying to find that unit. And it kind of became the whole party's like goal
Mhm.
is to help this character find his son. And so they all ended up with like a very similar, like, big dream in that sense, which is cool, you know, and kind of gave it all direction. But, that's not necessary. You don't have to do it that way. But,
Mhm.
I kind of, it worked well for what we were doing. And, yeah, so they have these basic tenets of the game, the principles where it's like nowhere's safe, the resources are scarce, players lead the way, like I said before. Rumors abound. It talks about just like rolling on the tables and like you hear stuff. It might be
Mhm.
true, it might not, because people
Mhm.
talk. Everything's personal, and that's where it talks about like tying it back into the characters' dreams and their moral dilemmas, their moral codes. The end is never set, like, and I liked that because it's kind of there's not a big bad. You know what I mean? Like there's
Mhm.
not this big evil lich wizard at the end of the whole thing that's like you kill him and it fixes all the problems. You know what I mean? It's like no, that's people have been terrible for a long time, and it's been without
Mhm.
a lich wizard, a witch lizard.
A witch lizard.
That's what I said the first time. That's amazing. New Pathfinder character. Anyway,
It's like write it down.
witch lizard. That's
Witch
great.
lizard.
He's going to be a necromancer. It's going to be really confusing. Anyway, so yeah, without like a lich, you know, and it talks about the end. Yeah, death is a part of life, you know, and talks about that too. Is like it specifically talks about not trying to kill the PCs.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you don't need to try to kill them, but if it happens, let it happen.
Mhm.
You know, and that's just, you know, their suggestion because people can, you know, play however they want. But
Absolutely.
you know, sometimes the dice just, you know, play against you, and it's fun to. For me, as when I'm a player, I enjoy having a big character death scene.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like I revel in those moments, but you know, not everyone does, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's up to your personal preference, and that's why not everyone's going to have the same play style. You're not always going to
Right.
like fit at every table because everyone is going to like something different, and the best that you can do is just find a table that enjoys the same things that you do. You know, if the other people enjoy a big death scene, then that can happen that can happen in your game, and that is something that all of you will enjoy versus like, oh, I don't want my character to die in such a way of like, I need to protect them at all costs. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just you should play a different
Right.
game most likely, and also find the table that works for that playstyle.
Yeah, exactly. And then like the last part was where it talks about like hope never dies.
Mhm.
And it talks about like darkness needs to be contrasted with the light of hope of a
Yes.
new and better life. Threaten the PCs, but don't snuff them out. Even in the darkest nights of World War III, there's always a speck of light on the horizon. And I just
Oof.
like that it ends on that note that like there's got to be a point that they're going for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's got to be that like that's what the big dreams are for, you know? And yeah, it's for having that light at the end of the tunnel, like the thing that they're fighting for, the thing that they're trying to, you know, get back to, you know, and I think that's cool. I think that's cool that that's built in. And it's there's a lot of humanity in this game, even with like within the combat and the everything's trying to kill you. Like there's a lot of humanity there, and I don't know, that's kind of what I like about it. So
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Actually, I'm trying to think because I mean there's definitely so many things that we could cover. It's so easy to endlessly talk about games. It's a bit of an issue sometimes.
yeah,
Um,
buying them, talking about them, playing them,
yeah, I'm not gonna
looking at
talk
them.
about pretty much the full shelf, but still gonna have games come in. It's fine. We don't talk, we and as long as we don't talk about it, no one thinks about it. And
Right.
it's mind tricks. But you know that thing that you said at the end, you know, that's what you love about the game.
Mhm.
I specifically would like to ask, you know, what specifically do you love about Twilight 2000?
I think it's that. I think it's not you know, specifically the light at the end of the tunnel part, but the I love the ability to have a role playing game and like tell a story with friends that has gravity, that has weight, that has drama. You know what I mean? Because it's fun sometimes. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's also fun to go in and like smash up a dungeon, kill a bunch of goblins. Like those things are fun. You know, but it's also fun sometimes to like, and it's also cathartic in a way to deal with those darker sides. You know what I mean? Like, because everyone has it. Everyone has that shadow on the inside, that like darker part of themselves. And sometimes it's nice to just kind of like look at it, go, "Yep, that's that," and then like go on. You know, there's a certain amount of catharsis to that. A certain amount of like therapy that goes along with it. Not that I'm using RPGs as my therapy at all, nor should I recommend that other people do so. But it's a way to like, you know, deal with those situations and look at those things of the world that bother us and like the things about humanity that bug me sometimes, and like deal with it and look at it and play with it and move on in a safe place, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I enjoy the darker tones sometimes, is because it allows for that, you know, and it allows to deal with those things in a safe place and walk away from it, you know, and be safe in my actual life, you know. So
Absolutely. No, I think that that is amazing, and that's fantastic that you found a game that can do that for you. I think and that's the beauty of TTRPGs is there's always going to be someone's favorite game.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
always going to provide some sort of comfort in one way or another. And I agree. I don't think it's right to use TTRPGs as therapy. But, there is something about being able to explore certain things through
Hmm.
these games in a way that's safe and in a way that you like yourself, you're
Hmm.
fine. It is just a character. It is just pretending with your friends and telling a story and having fun. And
Right.
those are all the important things. And I love that for you. And I think that I personally would love to get Twilight 2000. When I was telling you before we started to record that
Hmm.
like Free League was having a sale, that was like one of the first ones I put on.
Oh
So
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I am going to get Twilight 2000 because those stories just seem so interesting to tell
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I would love a shot at it
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
love to try it myself. And, hearing, I specifically, I'll shout you out, hearing other people tell those stories as well is
Hmm.
amazing. So please, if you haven't, check out Adam and his podcast Two Past Midnight, where they do play through Twilight 2000. And, they, even though it starts, everything new, they develop this story and they start finding those goals and tell this just beautiful narrative that you can follow along with yourself and experience without having to play this game yourself. And even if you do want to play the game, listening to that podcast is a great way to experience it and learn about it without having to get it first. It's basically the point I'm trying to say is listen to the podcast.
And you can also learn from our rules mistakes
Exactly. Learn
in
from
real time without
learn
making them
from
yourself.
yeah, you learn from others' mistakes and you'll
Yeah.
you'll do better. So
And you can
so
expend the
basically
experience points and get that skill. And yeah.
exactly. And someone's helping you, so you'll get about it. It's
Yeah.
it's a great system, truly. But no, I firmly believe actual plays are a fantastic way to get into a game.
Mhm.
I love thinking I like to think of this podcast as almost like a jump start. This is what this game is, and then you can go off and explore. You can
Mhm.
find those actual plays and you can get the game for yourself and you can start. But like this is a way for you to find out what's out there. And so I urge you to go listen to Two Past Midnight, especially I mean, if you like Session Zeros like I do, listen to the Session Zero as they create their characters because that was just a really fun experience. And so all the praise to Adam here. Great job. You do amazing work.
Uh, I got to give most of the credit to the rest of the guys on the show. So they're
Oh yeah,
amazing.
no, they
But
they
yeah,
do
yeah,
awesome as well. I just credit to the whole team.
yeah.
You all great, fantastic.
Thank you. I will pass that along.
Yay. But I think, we're getting to that point in the episode that it's, close to wrapping up. I'm trying to think very quick if there's anything that did not get mentioned.
Oh, we have a Patreon now.
Oh,
So I don't think we had that before when we talked. But
congrats. Hell yeah.
yeah, so we have a Patreon now. It's Dork Day Afternoon, so it's relatively easy to find. Currently, what we have as our Patreon rewards is we are going to start doing some video
Ooh.
content. Actually, uh, I'm assuming this isn't going to release next week, so this is all happening in the past.
Mhm.
In the past, on July, like in the first week of July, we were planning on doing a live chat with our patrons,
Mhm.
like a live like YouTube stream with our patrons. So that'll be up,
Amazing.
and it's just gonna be like a recap. So by now that's already up. I'm gonna assume because I don't think you're editing this in the
Yeah, no,
next
no, no.
week.
This is
Yeah.
going to be coming
So
out
check
in
that out on YouTube.
July.
It should be there now, and
Yeah.
and but yeah, we have some plans for doing some video content in
Mhm.
the future. Our intent is still to have Two Past Midnight be an audio only
Mhm.
format, and that's just because I'm OCD about story edits, and
Mhm.
I get more so every day. and I don't have time to do video editing. So
That is so
most of the
fair.
video we're going to do is probably going to end up being live stuff, so it's just like, here it is, it's us, it's live, done,
Yeah.
and then move on. But we're
That's
planning
awesome.
on
I can't wait.
getting in that direction. So that's going to be happening. And let's see what else. Patreon. I'm going to Gen Con. So Brian and I, the guy who does the voice for Emmett, the guy who plays Emmett, he's going to be at that's the one whose character's son, he's looking for a son. He lives in Indiana, so we're going to go to Gen Con this year. So we'll be there for that. That might be it. I don't think I have anything else.
Yeah. Amazing. No, that sounds awesome. I hope that Gen Con is fun. I keep hearing about it and it looks cool, but I haven't gone in the past and I don't think I can go, but I hope it's a fun time.
Yeah. I got all my tickets all lined up for the different games I'm going to try. So
yes. Oh, yeah. I forget that it's like huge. I mean, obviously you're going to go because it's huge TTRPG scene, but like,
yeah.
that's really awesome because I've only really gone to like anime conventions. And so being able to like go to one that's more like towards games, that sounds really cool. But, sidetrack aside.
Sorry.
No, all good. No, this has been fantastic. Thank you again for coming on and talking with me about Twilight 2000. The recording that we didn't do before, that was great. But this was also fantastic, talking a bit more about like that humanity side to the game and those social aspects. So thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, everyone who's listening, please go check out 2 Past Midnight and listen to the guys play this game because it's amazing. And, Adam's great and Brian's great and everyone else, absolutely great guys. They've also you guys have been really supportive of the RPG Goblin too, which I've very much appreciated. So
I love the show and I love the whole idea of it. Like the idea of exposing the world to more games. It's great because there are so many out there, and whatever anyone's interests are, there's an RPG for it. Like it's just the way it is
100%.
now. Yeah. And if there's not,
it's the opposite way too. It's like, even if you don't think you have an audience out there, I'm sure someone's going to play there's like a raccoon street racing 1-page RPG. There's someone out there for that. And like, maybe that's you. Yeah. Who knows? Now,
it might be me now.
If that is you. If that is you, now you know. Go look it up. I wish I knew the name, but it's out there. I know it is. But absolutely, I just really appreciate it, and I appreciate you for agreeing to do this again with me because this game is amazing and people deserve to know about it. So thank you. Thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone who has listened to this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I think it's the end. So, bye.
Thank you, Willow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the RPG Goblin. I really hope that you enjoyed it. It was a blast to record. And if you did enjoy this episode and you've been enjoying the RPG Goblin in general, please make sure to leave a review. It helps keep this podcast going, and all of the support just means the absolute world to me. If you enjoyed Adam in today's episode, then you should totally go check out his podcast, 2 Past Midnight. They've got a bunch of other things as well, but 2 Past Midnight is the one that I've personally listened to, and it is such a blast. So if you're ready to dive into Twilight 2000 and you don't want to get the game yet, listen to the podcast. It's fantastic. The account that Adam and the entire group uses for their podcast is called Dork Day Afternoon, specifically Dork Day Podcast on Twitter, and you can find them there and you can support them and keep in the loop of all the awesome content that they are coming out with. Again, it's Dork Day Afternoon, but Dork Day Podcast on Twitter, I believe. The names will be in the description below so that you can go check them out. The next episode of the RPG Goblin will be coming out July 28th, which is really exciting. That's the last episode of July. And we are going to be talking about Black Paper Moon, which is this absolutely adorable TTRPG that is made for the spooky season, where basically you're these monster hunters with these specialized weapons and powers, and you're supposed to defeat witches and ghouls and all of that. It's absolutely perfect for Halloween one-shots, and you can play them in long-form campaigns as well. And for the guest of this episode, we are bringing on the actual creator of Black Paper Moon, Vincent Baker, not from Apocalypse World, and we are going to be diving deep and exploring Black Paper Moon. So if you love the spooky season and you're looking for a light-hearted game to run for a one-shot, then you should absolutely be listening to this episode about Black Paper Moon. So make sure to keep your eyes out for when that comes out, which again will be on July 28th, and I'll see you next time.